Hi everybody, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. I previously did a unboxing video with some Lion brand yarn that I got a whole bunch of all at one time. And just recently, Bernat has released a whole bunch of new blanket yarns and a couple of other lines. And so I picked some of those up at Joann Fabric and at Michael's, and I just thought I'd share my, a first look and sort of initial impressions with you. So to start with, this is an old color, but this is just regular old blanket yarn. And I just got this out to compare some sizes because all of the new lines are all different sizes, even though they're all called blanket yarn. They did release a whole bunch of new colors of blanket yarn. And so one of the things that I noticed right away was that Michael's and Joann have all new colors, but they don't have the same colors as each other. They're kind of fall purples and teals, but they're a little bit different. So if you see one online, it might be exclusive to one store or the other. So I'm going to set this aside just a second. All right. So, so again, this is just standard blanket yarn. Normal thickness. This is a number 6 weight yarn. They recommend an 8mm hook. I've said in previous videos I prefer a 9mm hook with this because this yarn tends to be a little bit staticky and it grabs the hook. So I just find it a little easier to work with a 9mm. But I'm going to set this one aside. Not too far because I'm going to use it to compare. Alright, so this is a brand new yarn. This is Bernat Blanket Extra. It's a number 7 jumbo yarn. They recommend a 15mm hook. It's 300 grams. For 300 grams, you get 97 yards. So that's not a whole lot, but it is super bulky and it should go a pretty long way. Just for example, this pillow that they're recommending is a knit pattern and it works up with 2 balls. So that gives you kind of an idea of how much yarn you would need for a small project. So I'm going to put them side by side here. And you should be able to see this is quite a bit chunkier. And then I did pull out my hooks. So this is the 8mm hook that they recommend for regular blanket yarn. And this is the 15mm, which is a pretty hefty hook. So you can see they're pretty big difference between Bernat Extra and the original line. This colorway here is Velvet Teal. And then I also got a ball of Softened Blue. On the Softened Blue packaging, they show this pattern for a basket made with a stripe of the light blue and then a base made out of the darker blue. The label says on here to use 2 balls of a main color and 1 of a contrasting color, and so that is what I bought. And I figured that at some point I will do a video and work this basket up and just give you some final impressions on how I thought this yarn worked up. One of the things that I did notice at the store was that one of the balls of yarn had some sort of manufacturing defect, and it was like all stringy and weird. And I didn't buy that one because I didn't want to deal with the hassle. It was pretty much in the middle of the ball of yarn. But I don't know if that's going to be an issue once I get inside this ball and start working it up. So kind of just gonna have to play that by ear, and I'll let you know how this goes. I don't know if this is going to be one continuous ball or if it's going to have knots. I'm hoping there aren't a lot of knots, but we'll just see how it goes. It feels very much like regular old blanket yarn, just fatter. So really my initial impressions are pretty neutral. I like blanket yarn, and I guess I shouldn't say neutral, but they're about the same as how I feel about blanket yarn. I like blanket yarn. It works up quickly. It's very soft and it wears well. I'm hoping that this yarn has, a similar outcome. So set this aside. A couple of years ago, Bernat released Blanket Big, and Blanket Big then sort of disappeared. I don't know if they just got rid of it for the season or what happened, but I know all the stores were clearing it out, and people were trying to find it, and it got really hard to find, and then all of a sudden it's back again. So I'm not sure what the whole story is, but it's back. I was only able to find this yarn at Michael's, and I should say that the Blanket Extra I was only able to find at Joann Fabric. So I don't know if those are exclusive lines, but you can see here the difference. I thought maybe these were going to be about the same size, and again, they're nowhere near the same size as each other. So this over here is the Extra, and this is Big. And then we'll get regular old blanket yarn in the mix, and you can see the difference here. And it's pretty substantial. When you're not looking at these gigantic yarns, Bernat blanket yarn is pretty thick. And so just seeing how it's dwarfed by the Blanket Big is kind of funny. This Blanket Big yarn is also a number 7 yarn. Number 7 is the top end of the spectrum, and so anything bigger than jumbo yarn just all gets thrown in there. And you can see that it's a pretty huge weight range because this yarn and the Extra yarn are in the same weight category, and are certainly not interchangeable yarns. I bought 2 balls of their Purple Moonlight yarn. Each of these balls is 300 grams, and you only get 32 yards. So it's about 3 times thicker than that Extra yarn, based on just rough numbers in my head. I think it was 97 for 300, so yeah, about 3 times thicker than the Extra yarn. This yarn calls for a 25 millimeter hook, and so this is my 15 millimeter hook. This is the largest Clover Amour hook that they make. It's a PQ hook at 15 millimeters. I actually had to go to a completely different line. It's on the other side of your bag. Oop. My giant hook disappeared here. This is a 25 millimeter hook. It's basically like a broom handle. It's very, very thick. I think it's going to be rather uncomfortable to crochet with. This yarn you could also finger crochet with, so that's an option, and it might be less tiresome on your hands. So I've actually never tried finger crocheting. I might try that for this yarn. I was able to pick up this 25 millimeter hook for a couple dollars at Hobby Lobby, so that's where I got this one. The only other ones that I was able to find were bamboo or wooden, and I really don't like working with wooden hooks usually, so I tried this one. It's got a hollow handle, and so it weighs a lot less. I did also grab a 19 millimeter hook, and I was hoping that this would be big enough to work with, because it does fit a little bit better in my hand and might not tire out my hands so quickly. So it looks like it might work for this yarn, but the stitches would be a lot tighter. It's quite a bit smaller than what they recommend, which is this 25 millimeter hook, and I'll just hold those out so you can sort of see the difference. Yeah. Set this aside here, and you can see the difference in the size of these hooks. One of the things about these hooks is they did not come labeled in any way, so I did write on the end of this one. I just hadn't gotten a chance to write on this one before the stream. So I just picked these up the other day. But we'll set these, well, actually I'll just show you real quick. There's the size difference in the yarn, in the hooks that they're recommending for these. So this is for original blanket yarn, this is for Blanket Extra, and this is for Blanket Big. So those are your hook choices there. Oh, okay. So I'm going to just take a look over here at the chat. So yeah, somebody commented on the bag. This is a bag from 31. A friend of a friend sells it. It's one of those things where you can do like a party and buy products. One of the things that I liked was that they would embroider it for a few extra dollars. So I got Experiments in Crafting written on it. It's pink with unicorns. So it was kind of just a fun bag. I use it to carry my crochet projects around with me. Especially to my crochet and knitting night on Wednesday nights. So, I've been happy with it, but I just bought it for, you know, my own use. The last time I did the unboxing, I had the yarn shipped to me, and so I had a cardboard box to actually unbox out of. And this yarn I've just picked up at the store over the last couple weeks, so I just thought it would be nice to tuck it in there and kind of pull it out blindly. And somebody mentioned that they can't knit or crochet, but they want to buy all the skeins of yarn. I kind of felt the same way before I crocheted, but hopefully I'll be getting together some very beginner tutorials, and maybe we can teach you to crochet, and then you can buy all the yarn so you can start crocheting. One of the things I wanted to mention to you is that I've recently started up a Facebook page. I was a little bit slow on getting an Experiments in Crafting Facebook page together, and I do have an Instagram. So if you follow me on those, you can see what I'm working on, see new videos coming out, projects that I've finished up. And I hope that you'll tag me or share with me on the Facebook page any projects that you've finished, especially out of yarns that I've reviewed. And I'd be happy to, you know, take a look at those. And I like to see what people are making. And we can sort of chat back and forth too. You can leave comments and whatnot. So feel free to follow me on Instagram or like my Facebook page and, you know, all that. So I will move on to the last blanket yarn, and this is a weird one. I didn't even know that this one had come out until I saw it in the store. This is Blanket Pet, and so the thing about this one is that it has Everfresh probiotic technology. It's an odor control so that you can make pet items and they won't start to smell kind of doggy after a while. This yarn is a little bit thinner than regular blanket yarn. Other than that, it isn't a whole lot different than blanket yarn. It feels very similar. They recommend a 6mm hook. This is a 225 gram ball, or 8 ounces, and it's 269 yards. So I got this in gray and blue, and I was thinking about working up like a couple of dog sweaters, and they show some patterns on the packaging. So maybe some dog sweaters, maybe a little dog bed or something like that, and just seeing how it goes. This yarn I picked up from Michael's in the U.S., and you can probably see that it has these Stitch and Win, like, promotion going on. And what that is a sticker that they've put in the center of the yarn and sort of gummed up and possibly ruined some of this yarn. I'm going to set this one out of the way. It's really, really stuck on there. I think they probably did this because they don't want people going through the balls of yarn and stealing the tags in the store. But it's kind of made a mess of things. I think I'm probably going to have to just cut it off, and I'm hoping that this is on the end of the yarn, and not the, not sort of the middle of the ball, because then I'm going to have to stitch it back together. Just as a comparison, I'll bring those other yarns back out real quick. So this is regular blanket yarn. And that's just a comparison of those two there. It's a little bit thinner. It might work a little bit better for a dog sweater for a smaller dog, but it should be nice and cozy. And then just as a, just so you can see the difference here, this is the extra yarn and the pet yarn. And then, of course, the blanket big and the pet yarn. And there's a huge difference between those yarns. So, just gives you an idea of what, if you have to order these online, kind of gives you an idea of what kind of size range you're working in. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this works up and, see if it actually seems to work a little bit better for pet projects. So we'll see how that goes. Again, these are just sort of my initial impressions of this yarn, and not really final thoughts because I haven't worked any of this up. It's all brand new stuff that I've just picked up over the last probably 2 weeks. All right, so moving on to something that's not blanket yarn, but basically is still blanket yarn. This is velvet. It is basically the same construction as blanket yarn, but is silkier feeling. It's still 100% polyester. It's just shinier. This is 300 grams or 315 yards. It is a number 5 bulky weight yarn. Oh, hooks are falling.
You've got quite a few questions in the chat too.
Okay.
For when you're done with that.
So this is a number 5 bulky weight yarn. They recommend a 6.5 millimeter hook, so it may be just a hair thicker than the pet yarn, which recommended a 6 millimeter hook. And I'll move some of this out of the way. So you can see those there, and they're very, very similar in weight. So I would say that this is probably just a touch thicker, and it's very, very silky. It feels like a chenille sweater. I picked up 4 balls of this. I was just going to make a small, lap throw. I think there's enough in 4 balls. The colors on this are burgundy plum and vapor gray. So those are the 2 different colorways here. I'm just going to take a second and look at a few questions and see. Norma mentioned that you might need 2 or more for lab. You might, but I do know that when I've made dog sweaters in the past, that the yarn went further than I would have expected, because you don't have to make the underside generally. You make it for the chest area, and then it's just basically a cape down the rest of the back of the dog. So it might go further than you think, but you probably need more than I'll need, because the dogs that I'm going to be making sweaters for are Chihuahuas. So probably just make those and see how that goes. But yeah, it won't be as much yarn as you would need for a lab. Somebody's mentioning the corner to corner blanket. I'm really glad that you enjoyed that tutorial. I'm hoping to get some more tutorial type of videos up soon. They just take a lot longer to put together and edit because I have to actually make the whole thing in between filming. So just takes a little bit longer. Which one was the best price-wise? So all of these were about $10 per ball. So depending on how much you're going to need, The thinner yarns are going to go a little bit further, I think. But I was able to get, so all of the ones from Michaels, I got on a special that they were offering. They have a new buy online, pick up in store feature. And if you bought anything and did the buy online, pick up in store, you get 30% off your total order. And so I got all of these on a pretty good deal. The Joanne ones I got with various coupons, and I think I had a 20% off your total purchase or something like that, just to, you know, save a little bit of money for some of these yarns. But it really depends on what you want to do with them. If you want to make a big, chunky blanket, I think that you're going to need a ton of the blanket big yarn to get a blanket-sized anything out of it. I actually am planning to use that to make like a rug for my dog. And I know it's not the pet yarn, but she doesn't really like thick, like foam beds. I've bought her a bunch of different ones and she really hasn't been happy with any of them. So I was going to just make her kind of a squishy mat to lay on, because she tends to like just laying on blankets. But yeah, so price-wise, I think it really depends on your project, but pretty much all of these yarns run about 10 bucks a ball. It just really depends on how much you're going to need for the project. All right. As far as the Labor Day sale at Michael's, pretty much all of those stores constantly are running sales just back to back to back. So just my advice for buying any of these things is wait until they're running some sort of good coupon, especially because they're pushing these buy online, pick up in store things. They keep offering all sorts of discounts for that. So I'm going to set these guys aside. These are super, super soft and silky. I really hope that they wear well, like that over time they don't just start to fall apart. I haven't had that issue with blanket yarn, but this stuff is silkier and it might be harder to hold on to these fibers. The way that this yarn is constructed is they take like 2 pieces of thread and like twist them around longer fibers. And so you can actually, if you go in here, you can pick them out between the threads. So hopefully they're not so silky that they don't work their way out. Just have to see how it goes over time. All right. I don't know if I mentioned the colorways on this pet yarn. I should just let you know. This one is dark gray, and this one is denim. So it's not super creative names there. It's pretty pretty standard, you know, what you would guess that they're called. All right, so the last yarn that I have to show you is not by Bernat, it's by Caron. These are these new Caron Pantone yarns that are made with like a collaboration with the company who does all sorts of like graphic design stuff and photography stuff. They do all of like the color standards, it seems like. So they designed these in pretty interesting palettes. I picked a couple of these out. These were also $10 a piece, and again, I used a coupon and got them a little bit cheaper. So they have little inspiration things here showing how to work up a hat. I'm trying to tip that so that the light is not ruining or reflecting off the shininess. But they suggest working it up in like stripes, and then in between you use a contrasting color. Looks like this hat is basically the same. They used sort of little arrows here and like little speckles here. One of the things that's really nice about these yarns is they have some interesting palette choices. They're not just a gradient yarn. So this one has like a bright purple, sort of a muted purple, and then there's like this real gray and then like a light pink. So they're all sort of a purpley family, but they're not just a gradient yarn. So it's a little bit different than what we've been seeing recently with these trends of just straight gradient yarns. And then in this case, they have like a, you know, a picture that inspired this and the Pantone colors listed on the side. This yarn is, there's 100 grams total. There's 127 yards. It's a number 5 bulky. It's a pretty light bulky, just by eye. If I was comparing this, so this is a bulky weight, and so is that velvet yarn. And there's a pretty large difference in yarn there. So that bulky category is pretty wide, but I think this is probably a really heavy worsted, just based on looks. One of the interesting things about this yarn, it's 60% acrylic and 20% nylon and 20% merino wool. So that's really nice because that wool is going to give you the ability to block projects if you make something a little bit more open. So wool has a tendency to take a block a little bit better than just a acrylic yarn. So if you make like a cowl out of this and you want to go ahead and block it, or a scarf that's a little bit lacy and you want to block it, it should work and it should take a block pretty well. This yarn feels really nice. I can tell you right now that it is going to be a little bit difficult to work with because these plies are very, very loosely spun. And I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I can just unspin these plies, which means that there's going to be issues with this yarn splitting, which basically means that you keep hitting the yarn in between the plies. And you'll grab like part of the yarn and part will stay down. And so when they talk about splitty yarn, that's what they mean. This is very reminiscent of Caron's Simply Soft, which is known for being an incredibly splitty yarn. So it isn't a problem if you know going into it that you're going to be working with a splitty yarn, but just be aware that I can already tell just by eye that this is going to be splitty. They do recommend a 6mm crochet hook with this yarn. And this color set is called something. They kind of hit it here. I don't know what this one is called because it's, oh wait, nope, it's up here on here. Ultraviolet Minerals. And Ultraviolet is the 2018 color of the year. So I think, yeah, 2018 color of the year. So they're kind of featuring that color in this set. So yeah, that's this one. This set here is Morning Blues, and they based it off of this picture here. Again, they have the Pantone colors on the side. And, you know, same stats for this one, still 100 grams. And I can show you the colors here. They have a really deep navy, sort of a grayer blue, a teal, this bright, not even sure what you'd call it, like a deep seafoam, and then a real light teal. So this is going to be really pretty winter hat, I think, is what I'm going to make out of this. And there's quite a few patterns coming out for these Caron Pantone colors. But yeah, I don't know. It's really nice to see something that's not a gradient, but still works with color. And I really like that they worked with like a company that's known for photography and graphic design and really knows how colors coordinate together. Because they were able to release some color combinations that you wouldn't expect to go together, but really look very nice together. And I think with some of the Caron cakes and I'm trying to think, Lion Brand Cupcake, there's some really odd color combinations that don't work all that well together. And I think going, you know, partnering with a company where they really know how to work colors together was a good choice on their part, because I think we'll get some color options that are interesting and not just the same gradients over and over again. So that's all I really have to share with you. Oh, I'm going to check the chat one more time here. Yeah. Just looking here. Yeah, somebody mentioned that they're good palette choices for quilting. I think you can access some of these palette options from the Pantone website. I'm not sure if you have to like subscribe or pay for any of that, but there are tools that will help you choose palettes and put together comments in or put together colors in unexpected ways that really work well together. Just looking here. Yeah, somebody was mentioning coupons from Joann Fabric. A 25% off is a nice coupon, especially if that's a total purchase, because they don't run that very often. Generally, it's just the 20% off. And I know an extra 5% doesn't make a huge difference, but it does, even if it just covers tax, that's helpful. But yeah. Somebody mentioned my hair. Thank you. I just had it redone, so it's very, very bright right now. All right. I'm going to take a second and grab some stuff that I just want to share with you out of stuff that I bought out of the last few times here. So I was just going to grab a couple of shawls and share them with you. I don't remember. Sorry, he was asking if these are out of the last haul video. This one you may have already seen. This is just a shawl out that I've worked up. This one should have a video out right now. That this is the Lion Brand jeans yarn. So I made this out of 3 different colors of the Lion Brand jeans yarn. And I've been very happy with it. And if you want to know more about this pattern or the yarn itself, check out that video that should be available right now on the channel. This is one made with Red Heart. It's a Wrap Rainbow. And this is a video that will be coming out very soon. I haven't released this one yet, but you kind of get a little sneak preview of the shawl. I've really been very happy with this yarn. It's a Wrap Rainbow is a stranded cotton yarn, and so the cotton is letting me block, and it looks very nice. And so hopefully you'll hit subscribe, and then you'll get notifications on future videos. And this one will be coming very soon. One of the other things that I've recently tried is beading. I picked up a whole bunch of beads at Stitches, which was a few weeks back in Chicago. And I've really found that I like beading. And so I'm hoping to get a tutorial on how I bead and just adding beads to a shawl. Hopefully you can see these. I chose beads that match this yarn very well, which means that you can't see them, but they sort of glitter in the sun, and I really like how this turned out. You probably can hear the beads. I just use glass beads, but I've been very happy with this shawl. I don't know that I'll do a review on this yarn. This is yarn that I tested for a friend from the internet. She's just starting up a indie dyed yarn company, and as soon as she get some yarn available in a store, I will certainly share that with you, especially on the Facebook page. And maybe I can get some more yarn of hers and do a little review. But this was just a test that she wanted worked up. She just asked me to look over the yarn, and I've been extremely happy with her yarn. And this pattern is called Cherokee Rose. So if you're looking for this pattern, it's really a very simple pattern, even though it's got the beads. You just work from one end to the other, and as you go, you just work this edging. And so you don't have to go back and work the edging. It's just a 4-row repeat the whole way through. And then you get all the way to the center, and then you start decreasing, and it's the same 4-row repeat decreased all the way through. So this one I've been very happy with, and like I said, I've really enjoyed beading, and I'm hoping to be able to show you guys how I bead in a couple different ways. It's really not as scary as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a big hassle to do the beads, and I actually really enjoyed it. So, give comments a look over here. So somebody asked, how do you know when 2 yarns will work well together? That you can come at from a number of different directions. So one of the things you want to look at is yarn weight and do they match? So I'm not sure if you're talking about weight or like composition of the yarn, like can you mix acrylic and wool, or if you are talking about colors. Colors, I'm not very good at picking colors that go well together. My boyfriend, who does most of my camera work and all of the editing and everything, is much better at telling me when colors work well together. And so for that, I rely on him and, you know, a little bit of color theory. I don't know a ton of it, but I do know that, you know, you can pick colors across from each other or colors that are on a color wheel. So I get it a little bit, but it's not my strong point. So I actually rely on him to help me do that. As far as weights of yarn, what I usually start with is looking at the weight that they give. So if they say it's a number 4 yarn, and so we'll say it's a number 4 yarn, it's a 100-gram ball, and it's 220 yards, which is about worsted weight yarn. Cascade 220 is a worsted weight, and that's where it gets its name, is the 220 yards per 100 grams. If you choose another worsted weight yarn with about the same yards per gram, or yards per 100 grams, and about the same yarn composition. So if it's 100% wool and 100% wool, they're both about 220 yards per 100 grams. They should work well together. And I can't say for 100% sure that they will, but they should. The only way to be absolutely sure that 2 yarns are going to work together is to do a gauge swatch, which means that you make a square of yarn. So you do, say, 20 stitches across and 6 rows tall, and you measure it. And then you do the same with the other yarn. Use the same hook, and if those squares are the same size, then those yarns are compatible. Otherwise, you may have to change hook size or change your tension a little bit to make them match if you are absolutely certain you need to use those 2 yarns together. So hopefully that helps. I'm hoping to get some videos out a little bit about yarn substitution, and I've had some questions recently in the comments about yarn weights, and so I'm hoping to get some videos out that address those questions. See what else, anybody here? Somebody just mentioning the beads in crochet. Yeah, that was my first adventure into actually beading while I crochet. I've made a few doll dresses for my nieces that I put beads on afterwards, but I just strung the beads and sewed them on, and so that was a little bit different. This was actually using a tool called a beetle needle, and I actually have it right here. I'll just show you real quick. Like I said, I'll do a more in-depth review here. but this is the little tool that I use to crochet with beads. This is a teeny tiny crochet hook, and it's going to be very difficult to see. Hopefully you can see this. But there's a little tiny crochet hook on the end here. And all you do is you load this thing up with beads, and it's pretty easy to do. You can just kind of scoop them in like a dish, and you load it up with beads. And then as you're working, you start your stitch, you take your crochet hook out, you put this in, and slide a bead down and over your loop. And then you just put your hook back in and keep working. And it's really easy. You just go along. The other way that you can add beads to crochet project is to pre-string them, which means that you put a sewing needle on the end of your yarn and just put all your beads. So you just take a tube of beads, and if the pattern calls for 300 beads, then you load 300 beads onto the yarn. And then you have to pull your yarn through all 300 beads every time you want to make a stitch. So that is the other option for crocheting with beads, and it's a real pain. But yeah, those are the two options pretty much for crocheting with beads. Let's see, my phone keeps going to sleep, but all right. I think I've caught up with all of the questions. I'll give it just 1 second because we're on a little bit of a delay. Let's see. Somebody's asking if I knit and quilt also. I know how to cast on for knitting, and that's about it. I can make a really simple row of knit stitches, and it just does not come easy to me. I probably should practice a little bit more, but there's so many crochet projects that I want to do all the time that taking the time to learn to knit has just not really happened. And as far as quilting, I don't quilt. I do know how to sew a little bit. I've made some bigger sewing projects. I really learned to sew so that I could make project bags. And actually, I could show you those if you want to toss me one. There's one hanging on the wall. The St. Patrick's Day one is probably fine. So I learned to sew so that I could make project bags, and I've seamed together a couple of, put it down here so you can see it close up, a couple different patterns, and put a lining in, and there's some yarn in here. I put a pocket in mine, and I have a pretty good little sewing machine, so I can do some little decorative borders here. You can see like the little wavy edge. Tip it so you can see a little bit better. And then I just thread through some ribbon and seal the ends up. But this is a fun little project. They go pretty quickly. And I don't know. I've been happy with these. This is really why I learned to sew, because project bags are pretty pricey. About, I don't know, usually run between $20 and $30 if you buy them from Etsy, just from somebody who makes them. And they're certainly worth that if you don't know how to sew, you don't have a sewing machine, you really want a project bag. But I had a sewing machine, I sort of knew how to sew in a straight line, and I just took a couple of classes at Joann Fabric and just got a better feel for it. I'm hoping to get some other craft videos up soon. So maybe I'll show you how I make my project bags. It's a combination from about 3 different blogs that I've learned this pattern. And at this point, this pattern is pretty much my design. I've taken elements from all over the place and incorporated them into this final bag design. So maybe I'll go ahead and share that with you and show you how to make one of these from scratch. This one I made a little bit earlier on, and it's not as good. It's a little bit off shape, and you can see I forgot to sew the pocket before I put the outer bag on, so there's a little wavy line down here. But it was cute fabric, and I really love fabric. Just fun patterns. So, but yeah, I don't quilt. It would probably be a disaster for me to start quilting, because then I would start accruing even more fabric than I have for somebody who sews pretty infrequently. Check the comments here. Yeah, I agree with the drawstring bags. I won't use zippered bags on my crochet projects. A lot of the yarn that I use is hand-dyed, indie, very expensive yarn, and I just don't want to risk it getting caught in a zipper. But I could see that zippered bags would be nice for sewing projects. Somebody asking where they sell this beetle needle. I've seen them at yarn stores, like a local yarn store. I saw them at Stitches at one of the vendors carried them, but I ordered mine from Amazon. I did run into a little bit of a problem with the Amazon one, and I don't think I have my good one here. They are supposed to be sold with 2 black rubber washers to hold the beads on. So I can show you real quick here. I'll just load some beads. That one's escaping. But you can just like stick this in here and start picking up beads. It's a little easier to do it out of a dish. I usually pour them into like a little like trinket box that I have. It's ceramic. But you load the beads and then you can put a stopper on either end. That way they can't fall off. And I like to put the stopper over the crochet hook part so it doesn't stab through and hook into my project bag. But the ones from Amazon that I got, and I got 2 of them, they sent me one and it didn't have the little stoppers, and so they sent me a free one as a replacement, and it didn't have the stoppers. So if you do order from Amazon and they don't have the stoppers, I use these little rubber things that go on the back of earrings. I had a whole pack of earrings. They were kids' earrings from like Claire's. I think they were like $3 earrings. But these are the little rubber stoppers that go behind earring backs. And I don't use these when I wear jewelry anyway. So I just took 2 of these off and stuck them on the ends, and they work perfect. So beads aren't going anywhere. They sit nice and snug. You should know that these come in 2 different sizes and 2 different varieties. So I like the kind with they call it a crook, with this little bend, just because it gives somewhere for your fingers to sit. They do also come in a straight variety. And then they come in 0.8 millimeter and 1 millimeter hook sizes. And that determines the size of bead that fits on there. These are 6.0 beads, 6/0. That's how beads are sold. It means they're a little bit bigger than 8/0 or 8.0 beads. So they're numbered like wire. So as the number gets higher, the bead gets smaller. So the 6.0 beads work with fingering weight yarn, and the 8.0 beads work with lace weight yarn. So this is a 1 millimeter hook and 6.0 beads. So yeah, that's just a little bit about those. And you can get those with a crook or without. I'm hoping to do a little bit more work with beads soon. Like I said, I really enjoyed that. It was the first time I had done it. Finding beaded crochet projects, because I'm not much of a pattern designer, finding beaded projects has been a little bit tricky. There are some out there, but not tons and tons. Beaded knitting is a lot easier to find. These beetle needles do work with knitting. You just have to drop the loop off of your knitting needles and work it exactly the same way. You put the hook in, you slide a bead over, and then you can either skip that stitch or you can work it. And so depending on whether you skip it or you work it, you can make the beads either show on both sides or one side only. So I don't know enough about knitting to explain it fully, but there's a little bit of different technique, and you can check. This is the Bernat X Beetle Needle by Lacis, Lacis. They have some videos and tutorials that you can look and see how this works a little bit better until I get a tutorial together. All right. I'm going to give just a sec. Sorry. I'm going to give it just a second and see if any more questions pop up. I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream. I have a pretty new Facebook page and an Instagram that I've been updating pretty regularly. Not as much as I should, probably. But both of them are available. You can like me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram. I post pictures of projects I'm working on, a little bit of behind the scenes, and just, you know, there's a little bit of ability that we can chat a little bit more. If you want to share projects that you've worked up with some of the yarns that I've reviewed, or techniques. Somebody mentioned that they made a corner-to-corner blanket using the video that I posted. I would love to see that blanket finished. You know, go ahead and hit like on Facebook and share that project with me so I can see how it turned out. I'd love to see that. But yeah, I really like YouTube for sharing information, but I don't get to... It's not much two-way communication. So Facebook and Instagram allow me to, you know, chat back and forth with people, which I really like. But yeah, so looks like I think I got all of your questions. If you have any more questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section once this video finishes posting. Or again, you know, find me on Facebook or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting and ask me there. So I should be pretty accessible. And let me know if you're enjoying this live stream format. I know somebody mentioned that it's a good way to share all these new yarns and just do a whole bunch of initial impressions. And so I'm really enjoying this format. It's nice and easy, and I can just talk a little bit. But I do hope to do some projects with these yarns and, you know, do some follow-up videos and let you know final thoughts on how they worked up too. So, and for any of you who are not subscribers, go ahead and hit subscribe. And otherwise, I will see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.